Hey guys, welcome to Piano Rogues. I'm Ari.
And I'm Alairs.
So, what are we learning about today?
Today we are learning about the Sechs Ecossaisen by Beethoven. This is actually one of the woo pieces from when he was a young composer and still learning how to compose.
We call them woos because
because it's a capital W, a lowercase o, and then an uppercase O.
as opposed to opus,
Yes.
OP.
What it actually means is Werke ohne Opuszahl, which means work without opus number.
So it's not opus.
Yeah, so the literal translation is work without opus number.
So, we found this piece when we were looking into Beethoven's life.
And originally we were just going to use this for incidental music, but we ended up loving it so much, we actually wanted to practice it and potentially use it for a future episode.
So, we thought it might be a fun one to kind of analyze.
But the thing is, this is a piece from when he was a young composer, and he doesn't give us too many specific, strict instructions about interpretation.
Do you think maybe he didn't think about it yet?
Possibly. Yeah, possibly he didn't think about it too much, or also possibly he just trusted a performer to be able to come up with what to do themselves to make it sound interesting. Because a lot of what a performer has to do is start with the notes and the rhythms and the instructions and all that stuff that's on the page, get all of that played correctly, then you have to take all of that off the page and make it your own. There are schools of thought about this. There are performers who are very, very strict, and they only do what's on the page, and they do it perfectly, and they sound like machines when they play.
And I think that's what a lot of people think of as classical music. I find a lot of classical musicians very strict.
For me, my favorite performances are always the ones who put more of themselves into their interpretation of the music. So sometimes there's a little bit too much of me in my interpretations of music, but I guess that's one of the things that Ari likes about when I play.
So what makes this piece special?
This piece is interesting because it is kind of 6 separate little pieces, but they're all joined together by one section. And it almost takes on a verse, chorus kind of structure, which is very popular in modern pop music. But the difference here is that instead of being lyrics that are making the verses different from each other, with the same melody every time you go back to the verse, we end up with a slightly different melody that's still following the same harmonic pattern. Right, we are going to start by looking at the first verse, which is right here, and is only this first line. I'm calling these verses and choruses. Maybe someone else has a different thing that they refer to this as, but that's what these are to me. This right here, this section that we keep coming back to, this is our chorus. So I'm going to go ahead and play the first verse followed by the chorus. As you can see when we look at this, there is not actually all that much telling me what I need to do with this piece to make it interesting. All I'm given in the first verse is a piano mark, and I have these little marcato marks that tell me that I should be accenting the second beat in each of these measures. If that's all that I did in the first verse, it would be rather dry. So if I was to follow this perfectly, exactly as what's on the page, here's kind of what it would sound like. So the way that I like to play it is this way. So as you can tell, what I like to do is put a little crescendo as I am approaching the end of the line. So then when I hit this repeat mark, when I go back to here, I'm playing piano again. But then as I approach this part, by the time I get to this measure after the repeat, when I take the second ending, then I'm already forte and prepared for this. We arrive at this chorus at a nice forte. Here is where I like to do things a little different from what's on the page. Again, Beethoven does not mark a ritenuto or ritardando or anything in the music, but I always like to start it just a little bit slower, just holding back the beat a little bit and then move ahead, because to me that makes it more interesting.
That's my favorite part.
And that will bring us down to the second verse. Okay, so here Beethoven tells us that we should no longer be forte, we should be piano. And with each of these little quarter notes, we have marcatos, which means I need to give them an extra accent. Beyond that, and these slurs, he doesn't really give us much more that we should do with this. He does tell us at the end of the second verse that we should be forte again, because that is going to lead us back to the beginning of the chorus. So when we take that back, this measure right here is replacing this measure. We go back to the sign, not that measure. So let me show you what the second verse sounds like. I don't know if you noticed or not, but there is actually not a crescendo written there.
Gee, it seems like you like crescendos.
But I performed it with a crescendo because I think it sounds better than suddenly being loud. And also it lends itself really well to the fact that these notes are getting further and further apart. So it's almost like the notes have drawn a crescendo. So that's my reasoning behind my interpretation there. I want to bring these notes out. I want them to get louder. I want them to get bolder as I'm going down.
Do you want to show us the difference?
Oh, she wants me to try to play that piano without ever practicing it that way. Okay, let's see. What do you think?
That's how I originally heard it played when we were looking for it.
Really?
Yeah.
Did you like it that way?
It amused me because it reminds me of Beethoven's jokes.
Oh. Okay.
Because it's like...
Okay. Ari makes a valid point, but I still like my interpretation. I'm gonna get us over here onto the third verse. Now, if you remember, the second verse was marked piano. The chorus is marked forte. This one, notice anything missing? There's no dynamic mark written there.
Whatever you want.
What's a girl to do? I mean, I guess I could safely assume that since I'm coming from the chorus, which was marked forte, I should still be loud when I start playing the third verse. Another reason that I could justify wanting to play forte when I get here is that this has a very different texture from this first verse. If you notice, there's this great big thick chord right here. I've got my melody that's all in thirds. That's the distance between the two notes in each one of these. It's a third. I mean, that texture just kind of continues throughout the whole thing until I get back to this measure, which again prepares me to go back to the chorus that was on the other page. And let me show you what this verse sounds like. To me, these big thick chords, they want to be forte. It wants a thicker, richer texture here.
kind of reminds me of a carousel.
Yeah, it has a very carnival feel right there, and it's probably because of the thirds in the melody. I feel like that's a very carnival-like sound.
Very bright.
Mm-hmm.
That is the end of part 1. We are trying something new. Stay tuned for part 2.
Thanks for letting us steal your screens for a while. Stay rogue.